Welcome, Claudia Batten. I'm so excited to have you in the guest seat today. Claudia, for those of you who don't know, Claudia is a founder, an advisor, mentor, board member, and technology enthusiast. Serial tech entrepreneur, founder of Massive Inc., Victor and Spoils, and Broadly. Welcome, Claudia.
Thanks,
Looking forward to the conversation.
So good to be here.
Okay.
The list is long.
Yeah, I know. I was, as she read them, I was going through and going, yeah.
Were you ticking them off?
Yeah, kinda.
Tick.
Yeah. Doing a little fact checking in my mind. Yeah.
Impressive. Seriously impressive. Before we get started, we're going to throw you a few quick fire questions just to get things going, moving.
Brilliant.
And one word answers if possible. Okay, so first one, we all wanted to go on holiday, beach or snow?
Beach.
Party with 100 or 5?
5.
Nice, that was quick. When are you most relaxed, or when are you at your most relaxed?
Yoga.
Okay, how often do you do yoga?
When I'm on 7 days a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
Good for you.
Via an app.
Yeah, I have an amazing teacher in LA, so I have a huge amount of her classes that I've got stored up. So not even app, they're just all Vimeo links to her amazing content.
Wow.
Incredible. We might dive into
Yes.
that.
Yeah,
Off the yoga bug yet?
We
My
could
brother has
talk. We
tried.
could talk for
Yeah.
yoga this whole time. So good with that.
might
Or do it.
convince me.
Or do yoga.
We could do it.
You might convince me yet. Were you born with your strengths, or did you develop them?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think we're given our primary colours when we're born, and then it's for us to kind of, evolve those colours to our own palette, is the way I like to think about it.
Ooh, that's good.
I like that. Do you have a hype ritual? If so, what is it?
This was such a good question. I had to think about it, but it's listening to a great playlist or a great song. And actually, as I thought about this, Mallrats Surprise Me came on, so I'm just going to throw that out. It's like it's got a full bounce vibe, So that would be my hype ritual.
The bouncing is good.
Yeah, bouncing
I like
always
the
works.
bouncing.
In the editing, we should just add it here. Right?
Yeah.
If you could invite one person to dinner tonight, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Alive, Karine Rotfield. She's the ex-editor of Paris Vogue and is just a fierce, unapologetic dynamo. Yeah.
She is awesome.
Awesome.
Brilliant. I love that answer.
Those are great answers, so good. We like to start it with a very lovely open question. Who is Claudia? Why don't you introduce yourself, passions, career background, and what life looks like now?
It's so funny you say this is a lovely question. Like, I find this the hardest question. Who am I?
Yeah,
Hang on. Let me sit with this. It's a great question. I mean, I started my career as a lawyer. So that Claudia was a very kind of type A. I'm still very type A. Very type A, kind of good girl, did all the right things, got the right grades, worked hard. And it's not like I don't do any of those things now, but I've kind of evolved them and morphed my career into being entrepreneurial. And then really from there, I've gone everywhere from government and now as a director on boards. So I think, who I am is like infinitely curious and really oriented to like evolving my strengths. We talked about the color palette, evolving my strengths into areas where they don't feel as strong. They don't feel as fully rounded out. So I'm kind of always looking for opportunity as an entrepreneur. And I think that actually sums up who I am as well.
What are your strengths?
Oh my Lord, I said that you wouldn't be able to stump me, but that's a good question. I think being endlessly, infinitely curious is a massive strength. There's just nothing I cannot be interested in. It blows my mind sometimes how I can read the driest thing and I'll hit roadblocks with it. Like sometimes I look up molecular chemistry and I'm like, I might need to tap out here because I'm like really not following the depths of this, but the gist I'll be interested in. So I think that's a phenomenal strength. And I also think I've got real stick attitude. I will just keep going until I figure it out, and that can be a struggle sometimes. But I'm not really very interested in letting something go. That can go a couple of different ways from time to time. But yeah, I think those would be a couple. And I really learned to be able to speak, to be able to think on my feet. And I think those things, yes, you can be born with a little bit of that, but you develop a lot of those skills. And communication is just a really important capability for all of us.
Sure is.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You encourage others to live a squiggly life. What does this mean to you, and what was your squiggly line aha moment?
Yeah, so the aha moment was when I left Victors and Spoils. So that was my second exit. So my first exit was to Microsoft, and then started another company, Victors and Spoils, and we exited that to Havas Worldwide. So there were two pretty big exits in a pretty short space of time. And we'd gone through the motions and done all the work, and I was ready to kind of, get stuck in and evolve Victors and Spoils under Havas ownership. And I just realized I needed to step back from it. There was just this, I think a part of it was, and going back to what I mentioned earlier, it wasn't new to me to be part of an exited company that was under new management. I was like, oh, I've seen this before, and a lot of it isn't amazing.
Yeah.
And I don't think I need to go through this again. And so I stepped out of that, and it ended up feeling a lot like when I left law and went to New York. Originally, it felt like this step into kind of the unknown and this emptiness, and I got asked to do a speech for Ignite Boulder, which are these auto cue or fast forward speeches. They're interesting, they're quite challenging to do. And Squiggly just came to me. It just absolutely downloaded to me that what I had been doing was very non-linear progression, was the antithesis of everything I'd learned at school and at university, and just the power of it and the interest in it just subsume me, overwhelm me, and that's where the speech came from, and it's just been with me ever since.
So cool, because I haven't heard you say it, Liz.
Oh, it's because when I first heard Claudia say it, I just all of a sudden it went, wow,
Makes sense.
It makes so much sense, and yet we're still, even now, still trying to drive people towards a more linear kind of path. And it's like, why?
Yeah, it's this concept. I think there's a huge amount of fear involved in it. So the concept for me is the linear is progressive measured steps forward, and it feels so comfortable to write a plan and go, well, there we go, that's how it's going to work. And then just thinking life's going to throw all of the positive parts at you to execute that plan. And the reality when you step back from that, and sure, you still need goals, you still need to have direction, you still want to have an idea about building something, but when you let the mistakes and the failures and the mishaps guide you, inevitably you get to a much bigger, much more innovative and much more interesting place.
How do you get the strength to do that though? What is that something that's innate in you, or do you learn that as you were on a very linear path as a young lady, and then moved to the squiggly path. So I can see there's a lot of strength in you.
Yeah.
For the young and up and coming listeners, how do they find that strength that failure is okay, and to take that squiggly line?
It's such a good question, and I think there's a massive complex answer. I try and tackle pieces of this. I literally do a newsletter every week, which is short and spicy, and hopefully just lands a little you got this kind of note in everyone's brain. That's all I'm really trying to do each week. Through different lenses. I think that ultimately there's a couple of pieces to that. So one is just how do you gain the strength? And I think a huge piece of it is, and one of your questions was about community, how important is community? And I'm like, oh my God, it's everything. Because a huge piece of the strength is you cannot do it on your own. It's incredibly lonely and terrifying regardless. So you absolutely have to build a support network around yourself. And I've just recently created one for a bunch of female founders in New Zealand, which is amazing. We're trying to figure out how to scale that and spin that up bigger, which would be incredible. I'm just realizing I've always known how important community is and how important your network is, but actually having 2 years, we put this together as the pandemic hit. We've had 2 years now of this cohort of female founders working together, and just the sharing and the challenge and the wins that we've all gone through over 2 years is just, it's phenomenal. And everyone knows they can call anyone when there's a problem, and we all celebrate each other's wins together, and it's just, it's incredible. So I think, yes, we can all have inner strength, and I could pretend that I was stronger than most, but I think it's just, I've had great people around me.
Right.
The other piece to this is I think you're going to fail regardless. I think failure is part of the linear progression as well. It's just really well disguised in either not trying hard enough or in thinking that it's going to work and kind of papering it over when it doesn't work. So there's something pretty beautiful that happens when you open yourself up to squiggling, and you're like, okay, I'm going to have amazing days, and I'm going to have bad days, and I'm going to have days where I feel like I'm going sideways, but they're all information. They're all like, the good is not necessarily better than the bad. The sideways can be really frustrating, but it's all a matter of how you look at it, and if you see it as an adventure, and as you see it all as opportunity that you've just got to figure out, opportunities are just problems in disguise, but sometimes you got to really dig into it, right, to find that opportunity. Sometimes it can take a while. So life is like that. Like life isn't all gifts, no matter how you look at it. Whereas I think with squiggling, you get this new, fresh orientation to go, what am I being told here? Rather than, damn it, it's not working.
And it's almost like permission as part of
It's totally permissive. It's totally permissive.
It's kind of like, it's okay.
It's very freeing.
You don't have to keep going that way. Sometimes you gotta go backwards to go, or frustratingly sideways,
It's training your mindset, isn't it, as well?
Very mindset.
Yeah.
Very
it's
mindset.
Just
Growth
like,
mindset.
Yes.
Yeah.
Always just going, okay, I can do this. I can move this way instead of that way, rather than putting one step in front of the other every single day.
Doing what society tells you
Oh my God.
to do.
And that's such a huge piece, is you've kind of got to let go of the script a little bit, or everybody else's script for you, and allow yourself to write your own script, because I think that's a huge piece of it. And we trap ourselves in these really narrow little shoeboxes when we follow the script that society is comfortable with. And it's a great point, because often when you start squiggling, it's really uncomfortable for other people around you, and you'll feel the nervousness. It's often from your parents. Just say that because they care and they want you to be safe. We'll internalize that, like our ego wants us to be safe, so it'll throw up a bunch of stuff. And then typically a lot of your friends who are really happy being linear and restricted are not going to like it, because it's like, ooh, what is this bringing up for me? So it's a really important piece of it all.
I love what you said about how your friends who are happy being linear, because something I've learned from our conversation with Mel was that actually not everyone maybe wants a squiggly life. Not everyone wants to take bold steps, and so even that can be really hard when you want to and you want to take that bold step, but people around you are happy in the linear. It's interesting,
And look, different horses for different courses. You get to choose. Other people don't get to choose for you, but also they get to choose. And that's like the beautiful thing about, mankind, womankind, is that, we're all a little unique and we're all a little different. And it gets a lot better when we allow that in other people versus... But, egos are a real thing, and fear is a real thing, and this just bubbles stuff up from other people. And look, there's a point at which I think you have to think about who you need to surround yourself with when you're doing this, because if you have too many people in the linear camp, it might just end up feeling like more of a struggle than it really is. So I'm not saying ditch friends by any stretch, but just kind of understand where they sit and who you need to surround yourself with on the good days and the bad days.
And I think when I first heard you talk about squiggly, I think the point you just made was, was in it so clearly, which is, have they chosen to be linear? Because you could be happy in it because it's what you know and what you're used to, but you never actually made a conscious choice to do that. And so I think if you choose to and you're happy, great. But if you never saw an alternative, you know, and that alternative to be squiggly, then you actually haven't chosen to be linear.
I think of it a lot like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I feel like when you're just in that bottom security layer, that is what you're worried about. That's where you are at. And that, look, it's good. It's not a judgment. I have friends who are operating that way, and they're living a great life, and they're happy with their life, and it's not. Maybe they haven't even chosen it, but that's where they're at, and they're optimizing for them, and that's great. Yeah. But you know, many of us start to move up Maslow's hierarchy at various points in our life, and a lot of people, especially kind of early career, and then mid-career, and then even late career, start to move up the hierarchy, and I think that just opens up more possibility, and also opens up your ability to take on a little bit of risk, and that's, I think, when squiggly can feel like a really good, you know, way to orient yourself.
And how do you choose your people, your community around you? Like if you're linear and you're like, right, I want to go squiggle. I want to get squiggly. How do you choose, or how do you create a squiggly community around you? Because there are so many people out there, and I had this conversation with a friend of mine about 2 months ago, and he's MD of quite a large business, and he's doing it on his own. I'm like, find your people, find your communities. He just didn't really get it, and he didn't know how to do it. So what is your I don't know, what is your recommendation? How do you find your people?
I love that you're saying find your people. I often think that way. And in lots of different walks of life, actually. I think it's just a good mantra, you know, are these my people? And, you know, a friend of mine, Kelly Hoey, wrote an amazing book, Build Your Own Dream Network, I think is the title. She talks a lot about this. This is a big passion topic for her, and she distilled it into a book. So I'd read that book. And I think the dream part of that is a really important, you know, it's really important information. So I think it starts by figuring out what you need. And I think if you sit back and go, this is kind of what I need, and then broaden your horizons a little bit. So maybe it's showing up to some events at the Ice House, maybe it's going to some creative stuff, maybe it's getting involved in your community, maybe it's starting to ask around for a mentor. Like I think literally the solution to everything is getting curious. So it's always my first step is like, state the problem, do a little analysis so that you really understand what's going on, and then get curious and just look as broadly as you possibly can. Hence broadly, by the way, the networking company that we started up is like how can you get as broad as possible through your existing network. So that's where I would start. There's also this really interesting thing that starts to happen when you state a problem and get really clear on it. It's really funny how the solution delivers itself to you. I mean, it's you can just about rely on that, which is pretty cool. So, you know, we could get super woo-woo and cross our legs and chant and talk about the universe delivering. But I also think that what's happening is you create a really good filter for your brain. So your brain is like, oh, I'm aware of the problem I'm solving. So you look at your entire universe through that lens and start to problem solve for yourself that way.
I love that.
That's what I love about our world. You know, you think about an owner manager and that community that you build when you come into that room, not knowing anyone most of the time, and then you realize that there's so many people in here who could be, you know,
and from such
diverse, so diverse
industries.
Which is where it gets electric. It's where it gets really electric. I feel like it's, you know, that children's book, Are You My Mother? I feel like, are you my people? Are you my people?
That's awesome.
And the people that you least expect to be your people often become your people. I find that all the time. I'm like, how did that happen?
That's amazing.
Really, truly.
So true. Touching a bit more on your story, would love to hear what has been a mountaintop moment and a deep valley challenge over your journey and your biggest learnings from those.
So my learning actually is in what I'm going to say is my mountaintop and my deep valley moment. My learning is that the mountaintop moments are where you're solving hard problems. Like, they're really cool. Like, when I look back on the triumphs in my career, it's always when stuff went wrong and coming together as a team and figuring out how to fix it actually were the most fueled and exciting moments of my whole journey. And actually the deep valley moments were often when I stepped away from something seemingly incredibly successful, and I was conscious that, okay, I've got another squiggle coming, but there's a lostness to that. It's a very quiet, empty moment where you're like, I'm putting myself on another edge. I may not know what that edge is, or I do know what that edge is, but I'm very lost in it. So it's kind of the reverse of what you might think. You know, you might think that the big success is the moment that's the mountaintop, but I've always, you know, it's not that you don't have challenges and there's shitty things that happen, but they never felt like a deep valley, whereas being lost in your squiggle feels very deep valley. And there was an amazing TED talk by Elizabeth Gilbert, and she talked about coming home or finding home, and she talked about the same thing, the big success she had on the back of Eat, Love, Pray, and that actually that didn't feel all that different to all of the, you know, rejections that she got for other books she wrote, and that she realized she had to come back to what she loves doing. And I realized, like, actually what I love doing is solving problems. I get really fueled by it. I get, you know, I'm like, okay, well, what are we going to do, and who do we need at the table, and how are we going to get through this? And that's what I love. So it's been a pretty big reflection to get there, but I never felt that these like flashy external successes always felt shallow to me.
Can you prepare for that? So if you're preparing for, say, a big exit, and you've got a number and you're just about to do it, and then nothing, well, you sell or you exit. How do you prepare for that almost calmness and the next direction?
I have worked with some people kind of going through the process of that and explaining how it will be, but I don't think you can get it before you're there. I don't think you can prepare for it. I think you can faux prepare for it. So you think you can kid yourself that you are, and you know, you could have the, you know, bucket list vacation or the purchase or the whatever, but it's all, I mean, again, not to get super philosophical, but they're all like shallow, you know, consumer experiences or goods at the end of the day, and the real meaning and the real value isn't in those moments.
It's a good answer. It's a real answer.
It's pretty real.
Hold on tight, basically.
Basically, I love that. It's not a negative thing, though. No. I mean, it's just, it is what it is, and maybe the prep you can do is to get a coach or to get someone to help you navigate that. Surround yourself to the, like, how do you build your network? Well, that might be a good network of a couple of people who are going through it. I think I'd be very careful about going to the person who's been through it, because they may forget the tricky bits of it. It's very real to me. Like, for whatever reason, I've felt all of this on a very deep level, or I've given myself time for it, but I think a lot of people skate over it. But yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing. And a friend of mine texted me not that long ago. He's like, oh, you have multiple squiggles. And I was like, oh yeah. It's like, once you finish one chapter, there's another. It's not. There's a lot of books in this series.
Not chapters, books.
It's like Harry Potter plus.
That's awesome.
Nice.
What did New York do for you? I felt like when I did some research on your story, that was a bit of a pivotal first bold leap. It's not here, but wondering.
No, it's good. It's good. New York was pretty. I think New York kind of made me in many respects. or it broke me and then remade me. What was super interesting about New York, and I'm not going to recommend this for everyone, you know, I took a massive leap going from being a very, you know, well-employed lawyer in New Zealand and moving to no job in New York straight after 9/11. Like, so it was basically I stepped out of, you know, very linear into the complete wilds of squiggling and had an idea of what I wanted to do, but effectively I wanted to leap industries, and that's just not something that's done when you go to America. And you know, what ends up happening is like you feel like you're failing at life at this point, because, you know, you get on a subway and it's, you know, it takes a little while to figure out the subway, but, you know, you end up in Brooklyn when you thought you were going to be uptown and you're like, my life is just, I can't get anything right, you know. Then, you know, queue a couple of days watching MASH reruns and eating Ben & Jerry's ice cream, because, you know, back then there was no Netflix. I mean, the kids today have like the ultimate in wallowing with Netflix. Like, there's so much content, but back then we were limited in choice of wallowing content. But Ben & Jerry's was new, so that was a good opportunity. So, you know, it was so like, it was such a blow to my ego to go from being this respected lawyer, you know, I was still a baby lawyer, but, you know, people listened to you when you spoke and you got paid well and you wore the cute suits and blah, 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 blah. And then I'm in New York. In the middle of winter, it's so damn cold, you know, so it's cold. I like can't even figure out the subway, and, you know, it just blitzes you. And I think what's cool is it created this clean palette for me to create off of. It taught me how to network. It taught me, you know, how to lean on other people, and the letting go of that. You know, you read a lot of these really great stories of great, you know, people who've done the most amazing things, and many of them you find this like emptying moment where they're like, okay, well, we're gonna need to rebuild here. And I think it just gave me permission to know that I can rebuild and I can start things from kind of, you know, zero, if not a negative, and build them up. So it was pretty massive. And then New York's amazing once you start to get in your zone there. You're meeting people, you're creating great friends, and you know, Kelly Hoey, I met her in New York. She's still a great friend. You know, there are a number of them. So yeah, it was just it's phenomenal, but it was really hard. It was a really hard way to do it, for sure. And you do not have to do that to squiggle. I mean, literally, you can do the smallest thing and start to step outside your comfort zone. It does not need to be that. Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah.
Totally. What do people misunderstand about you the most?
This was a great question. I think it's that my confidence is without effort.
Wow.
Yeah. And I talk a lot about imposter syndrome. I still get it. Yes.
Hallelujah.
Still. Really? Still. Yeah. Still. It's a real thing, and I'm not. I don't think everyone still gets it, but I think if you're vulnerable and pushing yourself and stretching yourself and stepping into things that you haven't maybe done before. Like governance for me is this really new thing, and I know a lot about what I know, but I haven't done certain things that most directors have done and have on their career and have done in their career and have on their resume, and that makes me amazing in certain circumstances, and in others I'm like, okay, learn, figure it out. But even just with what I do know, stepping into a boardroom with people who are brilliant and amazing and have all had great careers, and I'm like, well, how is my opinion more valuable? And at a point you just have to go, okay, well, I'm here for a reason, and I have to back myself and test and learn, which I think is the best mantra for moving forward from a lack of confidence or imposter syndrome. And I'm inherently a reasonably confident person, but I do a heck of a lot of work for that to be the way it is. It's not like I just sit there and I'm into Futurama at the moment, so that's the binge watching I'm doing at the moment. I don't sit back and do that all day. Like I'm reading and I'm talking to people, and there's like a lot of other work that goes on to showing up than just reading the board papers or reviewing the questions for a podcast.
One a practical thing of building that confidence behind the scenes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a practical one is test and learn. So just challenge yourself to speak up and see what happens, and know it's actually kind of okay to stuff up. I still ask dumb questions, but sometimes the dumb questions are really good ones too. So it's a little bit of a just telling myself test and learn. I think another practical one though is testing with other people before you get in the main room, in the big room. So, when I learned to public speak, I would public speak to friends or borrowed people on the roadside.
Excuse me, can I borrow you?
I just need to test. Which I'm kind of joking, but equally, a lot of my squiggly stuff is I'm constantly talking to people about their journeys and asking them questions and seeing if stuff sits well with them. And, Liz has heard some of this in the past too, where I'll be like, well, this is what I think. And I see how something really resonates and sits with someone. And I'll see how other things don't land. So it's kind of test and learn on the, in the boardroom, and test and learn in the background, I think is probably the one practical. I'm sure there's a ton. If I started, I'd just,
Great answer.
get going.
Yeah. This podcast is a seat at the table. What does that phrase, a seat at the table, mean to you?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. For me, it's that for some reason I have the honor and the privilege of taking part in something where I'm responsible for more than, just what I'm showing up day to day for. So it could be a cause, a seat at the table could just be I care about diversity, and so how am I representing diversity in all I do? So in the founder group that I have, is there diversity there? What does it mean that there are no men in that crew? How do I think about that? Are we representing race appropriately? So for me, and obviously I think of being a director, the seat at the table. I think of being an executive. So it's anything, I think, where you're stepping up and having responsibility for more than just maybe the safe kind of measured thing that you could do every day. So for anyone, I think they could think about working towards having a seat at the table, or they do have a seat at the table in terms of something that's bigger than them and bigger than their day right now. So even an EA could think about, well, how is what I'm doing contributing to the support of the CEO that's therefore changing lives because of the mission this company has? It's just having that awareness of the responsibility of your role and how much bigger it can be than just maybe the microscope or the narrow lens you might give it.
I love that.
I was just going to say that. I love it because the idea that it's an honor and a privilege versus something we should feel at all entitled to because of what we've achieved in our life, right?
Yeah.
So that awareness of the privilege that it represents in some ways is.
I felt that it was such a great question to I love doing these interviews because you always get challenged to think and express your views, and same with public speaking. I think you have to really work out what your actual argument is and how you communicate that, and they're great reflections. And when I read that question, with all of the boards, I feel that way. But with each one, I've been like, wow, really? You want, yikes, okay, I'm going to have to step up here. I'm going to have to be really, and then, in New Zealand, I'm like, okay, wow, that's a pretty big responsibility. I'm going to have to really step up here. And so everything I do, I don't feel entitled ever. And I feel really honored and really privileged. And I take it very, very deeply as a responsibility. And I think we can all look at our roles that way.
Yeah. Would you ever sit at a table on something that you didn't deeply care about?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I think that when you don't, you start to phone it in. So it's not that I wouldn't, and it may not even be that you don't care about it anymore, but it also may be, and I've had this discussion with a couple of people, that you've done your piece and it's time for you to move on, and it's time for somebody to move into that role. I felt that way leaving Ice House, the Ice House board. It was really hard for me to leave the Ice House board because I so deeply cared about New Zealand's technology sector and supporting entrepreneurs. It was very, very hard, but I just got to a point where I was like, I've done my piece here, and I need to move on, and somebody else needs to move up into this. And I walked in here today, and I'm like, I mean, super jealous of what you guys have built while I've not been here. It's amazing, but also like, great, this is what renewal looks like. Maybe I wouldn't deeply care about the cause, but I'd care about the person I was supporting. But I do think caring and passion, you go the extra mile at that point. It's just, you can't not. And I like, as a litmus test for this stuff I do right now, I'm like, can I contribute? Can I add value? Is the very first question I ask. And am I going to obsess about this outside of my meetings? Cool. And if I can say yes to those two, and there's a female chair, then I'm in.
Beautiful.
That's so awesome.
There are many amazing male chairs out there. I'm just saying, getting some good swing. Turns out, they do a pretty damn good job. Yeah. Just saying.
So good.
In a similar lens, have you ever been part of a situation and felt, I don't feel like I have a seat at the table, or I don't feel like, not wanted, but not feel like I'm bringing value, or you know what I mean about that?
Yeah. I wrote an answer to this, and now I can't see it on the scribbles that sit in front of me. I mean, I think that when I don't have a seat at the table and I'm thinking about it, I've got to go, okay, why am I spending any cognitive load on this whatsoever? Why is this in my brain? Why am I obsessing about this? I'd really like to go to the Met Gala. I'd really like a seat at that table.
Same.
Why? Because I want to dress up in a cool frock. Bottom line.
Is it going to happen?
Well, I could probably put a bunch of work into that and make it happen. And actually, I'll come back to you on this one. But when I identify something and I understand why it's meaningful, and then I go to should I actually expend energy in this direction? Met Gala, I am not, people, just so that we're really clear about that. I just look at the pictures each year and go, what has society come to? And B,
all look very uncomfortable.
Yeah. And B, do I really need to be there? But I typically, if the answers are yes, I'm like, okay, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? And I think this is where, again, we'll bring up linear versus squiggly. So linear would be, what do I have to do all of the things, work, not work, it's binary. Squiggling is cool, do the work, see what the work reveals, do that work. Oh, it didn't happen, but holy crap, look at this other thing that happened. Suddenly I'm at, the Chanel show in Paris.
I'm at a different table.
I'm fine with that, yeah. So I think that's where, and going back to linear versus squiggly, I think sometimes linear can create these roadblocks and shut down stuff that would otherwise come up for you. So, I think for anyone feeling that way, and I think often this happens when you're wanting a promotion or whatever, don't look at what you don't have. Don't look at what you don't have. Look at what is in front of you. Look at what you can do, and just know that if you show up and do your all and bring your all, amazing things are going to happen. They really will. It just may not be on your time frame.
Of course.
So taking responsibility for not having a seat at the table.
Totally. Totally.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's exactly.
Which goes back again to the yet another moment for me around the honor and privilege of a thing.
Yeah.
Because not having it isn't necessarily the end of the world.
No.
Particularly if you end up at a different table
Yeah.
that you never would have maybe ended up
Sure.
Yeah.
at. Right?
Yeah. Sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And
Mine
it's
to just like
Which isn't unusual when I spend time with
It's like you remember those pick a path. I think they're coming back into kind of vogue now too. I've heard on the grapevine, but you're kind of expanding the pick a path options. Is the way I like to think about it. And so there's more. So yes, it's permissive, but it's also bountiful. It just may not be that you get to go to the Met Gala.
Yeah.
That may not happen. Also might happen.
Yeah.
You need to let outcome or really define outcome go just a little bit so that you can do the right work to maybe get asked to a whole maybe you get asked to the Met Gala but you've got somewhere better to go that night. I mean how cool would that be?
Wish I could be there, but I can't.
I know.
Because I've got something else
That's even. Unpacking that further, I've got here, society is set up in a linear, safe, risk-adverse way that can hold people back, which we've been discussing. What is a piece of advice for those feeling stuck in that linear life and want to step out of their comfort zones and forge a different way forward?
Yeah, I think that, again, I go back to curiosity. I think for anyone feeling stuck, I like a good problem identification moment. So I definitely think sit with what's really going on for you. What are you longing for? What do you feel isn't working for you? I'm a really big fan of doing a personal life audit. So that's just a big list of what's working and what's not working. And I actually did mine this morning.
Wow.
How often
Interestingly.
do you do a personal life audit?
So we'll go woo-woo for a second.
I love woo-woo.
I do it every month on the full moon. Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, so
Why?
here's the thing. So
Wow.
okay, astrology, not really real science, we'll just put it that way. However, there is something magnetic that happens with the tides that is influenced by the moons, right? That is for real science. And we are all energy bodies, and so we also respond to these theoretically. Extrapolate. There is a line that you can create between a full moon, what's going on, kind of energetically and magnetically, and us and our ebbs and flows. So full moon theoretically, that was all such junk science, by the way. So you're all welcome.
It sounded good to me.
Yeah.
I'm all in.
One day I'll be able to explain that way better than I just did. It's all quantum. It's just all quantum. So on a full moon, theoretically, is a time for renewal and kind of assessing and rebirthing, etc. And then the new moon is the electric, make new things happen. So on the full moon, I do my what's working and what's not working with the aim that I'm kind of shedding, assessing, moving towards the new moon. And new moon, I do 10 I am statements, which are very specific things about, you could call them your new moon wishes, which is like an astrology thing, but I like to make them I am statements because it makes them really powerful and the tense is really right. So,
Awesome.
yeah, so that's how I don't even know where the question started, but we got onto the moon. That's awesome. But I just did my personal audit this morning. I did a list of what's working and what's not working. What's pretty cool about that too is it gets you out of this really negative. I always challenge people to put more in the what's working than the what's not working. And it just, it's kind of like the gratitude practices just definitely do work because you're just thinking positively. And this also just helps you see, I'm actually not doing shit at everything. It's just a couple of things that I feel like I'm doing shit at. So I think that problem identification, a bit of personal audit will help you get clear on why you're feeling maybe that you want to squiggle, maybe you need a bit of change. And then from there, I always say get curious. So read, talk to people, get a coach maybe. I'm a fan of just going for some walks and just like once you've got the problem identified, just like let that mull, listen to some great podcasts. Like there's a lot of places you can get information from, and you'll eventually start to see that ideas come to you. Some people like to journal. That can be quite nice too, because you're just kind of letting stuff come through and flow. But I think walking for me is the same as right. People will absolutely disagree with me on that. But I think that's a really, really good place to start. The other thing I would say is you got to ditch the I'll do it when and it must be perfect before. You've got to ditch some of these like restrictive mind games. Those are just your ego trying to hold you in the now because it's way comfortable for your ego, and your ego just wants to protect you. But I'm just like, start making soap, start selling it to your friends, just start small. If you really want to make soap, don't let like, oh, I don't know where I'm going to mass manufacture it. Like we'll worry about that later.
Too far ahead of yourself.
Let's just start with making a few soaps in your weekend and selling it to friends and getting some feedback. Let's just start with posting a couple of things online and see. And when you look back, there are some beautiful examples. The Marginalian, who's Maria Popova, who started as Brain Pickings, is a beautiful example where she just started with some musings that she sent to some friends, and now it's just built in this like phenomenal newsletter, and she has beautiful prints that she does, and just it's this whole empire for her now. Ryan's toy review was this like multi-million dollar making enterprise of this little kid who was 3 years old and would open, we've all seen the unboxing, but this was early, and his mum and dad just threw these things up on YouTube, typos, like editing issues galore, and this idea that it needs to be perfect and that we need to wait, it just isn't a thing. Don't put out shitty soap. Make sure the soap smells gorgeous, but test and learn.
Man, that's so inspiring to me. I love that.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on how society or the system could be set up better to encourage the squiggly life? Linear thinking seems to start young.
Yeah, it does start young, and I think it starts at a certain point in school where we go from letting the kids just be creative and do whatever and run around like idiots, and then we suddenly switch gears with them, and for some reason they have to sit in their seats for many hours and get their math problems right and work on the handwriting. I mean, I don't know what kids do these days at school, but it's same shit, different day, different generation. And I think for me, when you're colouring outside the lines, which is ultimately what I'm encouraging everyone to do, it is really important to know where the lines are. So there is a fundament of education that we all need, and I'm actually much more of a purist when it comes to education than people might think that I am. I think communication is powerfully important. I think maths is critical. I think science is phenomenally valuable. History is just, learning to read, learning to analyze, learning to see cause and effect, learning to see repeated patterning. These things are so important. So I love what we probably call classics now from a schooling standpoint. But we've also got to find ways to encourage kids to colour outside the lines and to test things. And look, I'm not an educator. I don't know the best way of doing this, but I think it starts with the schooling system just literally throwing some parts out of what they do. Not the curriculum. I think the base curriculum I think is excellent. Yeah. But how do you encourage kids to safely blow stuff up and learn from that, or maybe fail a couple of exams and learn how to do some summer school or something to make the grade up? I always remember somebody laughing at me, and she said, I've never ever had somebody negotiating their mark with me before, but she was like one of my law tutors, and I came in and I was like, look, actually I think I deserve an A for this, and here's why. And she gave me the A, and she was like, I was just I couldn't believe that you were negotiating with me. That was just like so impressed. That's all, like teaching kids that.
And they do it now. They do it.
Well, they
do.
And
parents does it all the time.
Yeah.
Go kid.
Yeah.
Well, and parents have to be prepared for that too. If you've got a rule in place and your kid can convince you that he should be able or she should be able to do something that you've said no to, let them do it. If they put a good argument up, why not?
Yeah, I was always the annoying. I've got two kind of stepsons, but we're just family, right? And Whenever they wanted to do anything, I'd need to see the business plan. And now I've got the older one who's like, 31. I've got him doing his OKRs for his personal life goals. Like, I'm like, well, we need to do these as objectives and key results. So he's got a Google spreadsheet that we do like quarterly reviews on. I am that parent.
I'm going to start that as well.
It's so good.
OKR for the 15 and 13-year-olds.
And it is important. Like, I love the idea of knowing where the lines are. And curriculum is important, and then so are choices.
Yes.
To kind of push that a bit. And know when you are, and not have somebody prescribing to you that if you want to be that, you have to do this.
Like, I remember from high school, it was like you're an intermediate, which is what, like 12 and 13. You're like, what subjects am I going to do at high school?
Oh my God.
You're freaking out because you're like, then it could layer into what I can do at uni. And I look back and I'm like,
none of it mattered.
Why did I care so much? Why did I lose so much sleep? Why did I even think like that?
This is such a huge point. Actually, this is possibly the most valuable thing we could do for the younger generation is take that pressure off them. I don't know why it even exists. And this pressure we're putting on our 16 and 17-year-olds to know what they want to be when they grow up, like, screw that. Like what's the most limiting and anxiety provoking thing we could possibly do to these kids? Any study, any learning is great. You will pivot from that as needed. Just get interested.
So true. It still blows my mind. I'm like, why do I care so much?
Such a good point.
Well, that surprised me when I got to New Zealand and was experiencing the cool school system through my daughters. It was more so here. I thought we were bad in the States, but actually that sense of if you want to be this, you have to do that.
Totally.
I mean, on the flip, it worked out reasonably well for me because I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, and I worked hard and made sure I didn't get into trouble because that wouldn't have helped me, and then I could, pivot off of that. So I'm like a big fan of being a nerd and getting the work done, but we've just... Not everyone is, not everyone's given the same primary colors. So, let's give everyone a bit of a break.
And you still have to work hard on that squiggly line.
Oh my God. Potentially harder. And probably harder.
You have to lean in and do some hard work to get to wherever you might go. It's not an easy. That's not the easy way out.
Squiggling's kind of 360, whereas linear's a bit 180. So you are actually grabbing much more broadly with squiggling. So I do think you're doing more work. Like, even if you just thought about it, it's like my golden retriever. Whenever you walk a golden retriever, they go back and forth and back and forth. And he walks like 3 times the mileage that I do. I mean, that's kind of squiggling in many respects. Linear, yes, it will get you from A to B faster, but the question is, like, what are you missing? Both along the way, and also in terms of, like, if I just totally let my golden retriever navigate, would probably get somewhere way more awesome than my stupid linear human path. We'd definitely get a lot wetter. Muddier.
That's awesome. What are some practical ways that businesses can adapt to the squiggly line?
I mean, I think for businesses, it's all about creating space in people's days. I mean, the cardinal sin that most businesses are committing is that they are going manically from meeting to meeting and email to email and thing to thing. And then we think something like a Slack channel is going to actually make things quieter or it actually makes things busier. And then we have to check out LinkedIn, and then, oh my God, I got to Instagram this, and then, well, what about? So there's just this like breathless pace that business is being conducted at, and we're not giving anyone the white space to actually think and invent and get stuff done, with room to think. And so I'm a big fan of Maker Time, which was a Paul Allen blog post of like forever ago about, there's makers and there's managers. And I even think managers need Maker Time. We all need a bit of time a couple of times a week, 2 or 3 hours that you just carve out, and it's your time to think about your budget or your strategy or what's working and what's not, or review your OKRs and see, are we really getting the momentum we thought we would? I just step back and look at the big picture. It's like invaluable. My husband's an artist, and he's a sculptor, and I watch him sculpting, and he's always standing back from the work. he's up at it for a little bit, banging on it, but mostly standing back and looking at it. And I'm like, that's how we need to think about doing great things and new things, building new things. I'm a big fan of like email-free days or, portions of days, meeting-free days or portions of days. It's a little bit different in a client-facing business, but you can figure that out. And actually, if you communicate that properly, your customers are going to be like, oh my God, we need that,
Yeah.
So I just think anything you can do to create space for your people, and even like, limiting meeting times or limiting how long an email can be or leading by example on that. There's just a lot of stuff we can do to just take a bit of the relentless pace off and get some real thoughtfulness coming through.
That's a brilliant answer.
Oh, yeah. I think you've heard me say this. The other Claudia moment years ago when you said you could be busy or extraordinary, but not both.
Yeah.
100%.
Oh my God.
That was,
Another one of those.
that was my band busy moment. Yeah, and I'm still there. I just hate, literally, if somebody says, I know you're busy, I break out. I feel like I break out in hives.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not busy. I'm trying to be extraordinary. Don't you understand?
And it's forever eluded me what the alternative word for busy is, because sometimes it's not that. But because,
Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes to be extraordinary means that you do need to watch Futurama. You need to have a moment where you're just doing some faffing.
Nothing wrong with a bit of faff.
No, nothing wrong.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Taking time to smell the roses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It goes nicely to the next question. What does the word momentum bring up for you? How important is it in a business and a career?
Yeah, I think that, so for me, momentum is everything, because I think about it being the thing that propels you through the squiggle. So what gets you from a backwards and a sideways to an up, it's like getting some real momentum. We can think of a roller coaster to get like a nice visual on that. And the way I then think about that is that it's about the actions being more important than the ambition. So it's not just so that you don't sit back and have an ambition and have a vision for where you want to go, but it's your moment-to-moment actions, and particularly when you get stuck. So often when people call me or reach out to me and they say they're stuck or they've got a problem or they're frustrated or they're really depressed, I'm just like, what is one thing that you could do right now that's going to feel like you're achieving something? I'm like, I don't care if it's 5 emails. I don't care if it's like, a load of laundry. I don't care if it's going for a walk. Like you've got to create these actions that every day fuel some forward momentum, fuel some forward energy for yourself. And one of the other pieces I add to this, which people hate when I say it, but I'm right, so just listen, is sometimes it's about picking up that thing you're procrastinating on, and most of the time it's about that. So inevitably you'll create drag with that stuff that you just can't get to, or you won't get to, or you don't want to do. Like cold calling clients has always been a favorite example of mine, because I don't like doing that. But the funny thing is, once you start picking up the phone and talking to people, you're like, oh yeah, people, I love people, this is cool. Okay, no one wants to do their taxes, no one wants to do their expense reports, but actually once you sit down and get into flow on this stuff, it's not that bad. And it can create a massive amount of momentum, because you can clear some of that crappy backload and create space for some new stuff to come through. So momentum's your propellant for squiggling, basically.
Is momentum to you the small things or the big leaps?
I think momentum's absolutely small things.
Yeah.
I think the small things will add up to moving things on a big level. And it's such a good question, because I think that this is the magic truth of it. Because when you're stuck, or when you don't know, we asked the question earlier, what can you do if you want to squiggle but you're not? Find something little.
Yeah.
Like you don't even have to start making soap. Talk to a couple of your friends about their soap needs. Start to look up, essential oils, price them, it can be tiny, baby little, clear out your spare bedroom so you've got room to make them. Like it can be anything like that. And I think when you're doing it with the intention and the ambition held true, you start to you start to work your way through to that ambition or something even more awesome that you didn't see coming.
You make it easier on yourself because you're like, oh, well, now that the suite bedroom's free, I might as well get in. And then now that I've got the equipment, And
you make it easier on yourself by doing an easy thing.
Yeah.
Like actually doing an expense report isn't hard. It's just, no one wants to do it. But, once it's done, it feels, it's cleansing. I feel like, and you do it and you're like, got that done, check that off the list, and there's magic in that. There is magic in that.
It's like the times you go and put something on your list just to take it off. Because that creates a bit all the time. It's like, I just did that and it wasn't on the list. I'm putting it on there.
I've got a highlighter and a red a double tick.
Love that. Double line and a tick. Beautiful.
Is there a point where you think sometimes you can have too much momentum and you're like spiraling a little bit? And if you what happens when you feel like you get to that point? And what's sort of the practical advice around that?
It's a good question, and the immediate question that comes up for me is like, is that actually momentum or is that chaos?
So just spinning wheels.
I feel like that's borderline being busy, and look, it may not be, and it may be that all of the things you are doing are really powerful. It's just the way you're doing them is in this very chaotic, hyperventilating way, and that's cool. Like from time to time, we might need that to move ourselves through, but it's not sustainable. And I think for me, a key part of momentum is you need to be able to come back to that every day. And momentum needs to be something you actually rely on your worst days, because on your good days, it'll kind of take care of itself. And even in the sideways, it tends to kind of take care of you. You may need to do something little. So I think it needs to be a lot more reachable than that. And look, I think the question I would always ask myself is like, is this working? Like, and is there a part of this that isn't? Or if it is, then, awesome. I've got 2 weeks coming up, bouncing from board meeting to board meeting. Like there's going to be a bit of chaotic momentum going on there, but that's not sustainable. Like I'm very well aware at the end of this, when I go back home, like there's just going to need to be a lot of dirt digging and yoga just to recalibrate. Because it's just, it's like cognitively expensive to do 2 weeks back to back. It's totally doable, but it's all in, very all in.
And that's the beauty of the kind of doing the life audit or the review habit that comes with asking yourself what's working and what's not. Because then you might do something differently as a result of answering those questions.
Yeah, that's a great point. And usually, and I actually didn't do that this morning because I was kind of getting ready to fly up here, but usually I would go, okay, what are my actions that I need to put forward in the next kind of couple of weeks to help shift what's not working. And also, a lot of it are identifying the actions that are supporting my what's working. Because I think if you skip over that, then you tend to orient yourself to the what's not working, and all of the stuff that you were doing well on kind of falls by as you overcorrect. So I think it's a great point.
Learning so much. It's great. You're a regular speaker on digital media and building businesses of the future, which is so cool. What excites you the most about the future of business?
That's just such a small and easily answered question. But actually it can bubble it up to, I feel like we're at this just massive point of massive point of change, this massive recalibration. There's so much new coming in. I think this is a widely accepted point. I just don't think we've ever seen this amount of disruption ever in industry. And there's a collision that will happen off the back of that. It's going to break some traditional stuff and allow real opportunity for some new and some reinvention to come through. So net, when I really step back from it, I'm just like, well, what, be the change you want to see in the world. Like, what are the forces? What are the waves that you can ride to get, to have your part in the future and to create that future. So, it's the collision of like what blockchain can reveal meets cyber, meets I should have said crypto, but cyber sits out there. Like, how are you going to deal with security? That's like a massive piece. You can't build anything without that consideration. Meets a lot of the like e-vehicle and the implications of what that's going to do. There's a lot of consolidation happening within industry and across industry. So, really, we can absolutely pick a path right now, and there's just so much permission and so much opportunity. And it, honestly, going back to what businesses can do to squiggle, like if there was ever an argument for creating some space and for your team and for yourself, that's it. Because your industry may not be your industry. I mean, this is the thing that I spend the most time obsessing over, is like, what would wipe out the business that I'm working with here? And it's not necessarily one thing. It's potentially multiple forces. And so continuing to ask yourself that question. It used to just be competitors, and now it's just like anything could, or multiple anythings could. You look at fintech, and I'm always saying that's going to be multiple paper cuts that kill you. It's not going to be one death blow. Yeah.
What does the world look like in 10-15 years time?
Yeah, the timing piece is what becomes the hardest thing, and I think that's what's most challenging to business, because you can guarantee there'll be in 5 to 15, 10 to 15 years, you can guarantee there's going to be some pretty seismic change on a consumer level. So I think consumers will demand more. You look at what machine learning and predictive and AI, where they're starting to go, and I think 10 to 15 years you're going to really see them as bedrocks of business. So if you're not thinking right now about your consumer journey and your consumer experience and starting to bring those things in to build new experiences, I don't know that you have a seat at the table in the future. Would be how I think about that. I mean, broadly, and it's hard being in New Zealand, because I think that the future will look different in various parts of the world. So New Zealand arguably could be a bit more progressive than the US, though you'd think it would be the other way around. But the US is so much holding up industry in the US, it's actually hard to get seismic shift, whereas New Zealand could actually do some pretty edgy things if it decided to. I think ultimately, like, big picture for me, and maybe I'm being a super Pollyanna here, and I probably am, it's kind of my natural orientation, but I like to think that we're going to build in much smarter decisioning into businesses. And so where we get to is this radically non-BS place, where we're really clear what we do and the outcomes that we'll have. And I'm specifically thinking about environmental decisions with that, but I also think there's a long way to go in terms of how we deal with our human resource. And so I also think, there's a lot of BS around resources and salary and the work, frankly. We treat a lot of humans like they're robots. And let's get the robots, I'm always like, let's get the robots in to do a robot job and let the people deliver that next level.
Nice.
So I'd like to think we're looking a lot more efficient. I think there's a lot of inefficiency built in the system. And it's a slightly meandered answer, but I think that's the challenge for all of us with our businesses, is how do we, and now is the time to be doing it, and some people have been working on it for a little while, but how do you drive efficiency in your business and in the decisioning that impacts your business, and frankly flow that through to the consumer, so there's a more transparent, clear, trusting kind of place that you're meeting your consumer.
I think that answers the question of how can business leaders, stay on the pulse of things? But is there anything else you'd like to?
No, that was exactly what I had, was creating space to think and imagine, and let your team, we business leaders, we tend to think we have all the answers, and I'm like, we really don't. It's like, the answers come from everywhere. It's about listening.
So, and if you can show people that and genuinely accept that it's not about always having the answers, and it's okay to bring the questions. Like, you wander around and you turn up tomorrow with not an answer about something, but a question about something that makes everybody think. Then that's kind of getting the pulse on the future, because it's kind of saying, well, I don't know what this means, but I think it means something.
Yeah.
Or it might mean something.
Yeah. Oh,
Can we have a little,
I'm so big on not having answers and asking questions. We'd go a long way if everyone oriented. I mean, it would potentially get a bit boring if we all swung that way all the time. But
we need to come up with some answers.
But encouraged to be like, I don't know.
Really encouraged to say I don't know.
Yeah.
Which kind of ties into the how do we help kids be more squiggly and less linear. There's a bit of an issue for me in that we pretend that there are right answers to everything. Is Pluto a planet? Is Pluto not a planet? Back in the day, I would have got it, incorrect against my well, maybe it's not because blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Today, that's correct. And I mean, insert every other fact that you heard in the 80s. Is fat good for you? It turns out it is.
That's been curious, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been super curious.
Yeah.
Thinking more about what's not there than what is there. I think that's, in many ways, that sums up squiggling. Yeah.
So cool. You've answered, we've talked a lot about, what does community mean to you, but I would love to hear about your community, the founders group, and just how that works and what life that's given you.
Yeah, I'm so passionate about this. It's been an amazing experience. So we'd done these in-person lunches for a period of time with a pretty broad group of folks, and I had one planned for March 2020 and had to cancel it for very obvious reasons. I was in America. Actually, that may not have been obvious. So a bunch of New Zealand people, when I came out from America, we would have these in-person events. And so it got cancelled. And, lockdowns were kind of the new white bread. And I reached out to the group and I said, how is everyone going? Do we want to jump on a call and just do a check-in?
Yes.
And so a group of women, they were female founder lunches. A group of women got on the call and we chatted, and I said, do we want to do this again? And they were like, yep. And I'm like, do we want to do it in a month, in 2 weeks, or a week? I was like, in a week. So for over 2 years we've been having a weekly call.
Wow.
Yeah.
That builds community, really.
I mean, massive. And it was pretty out of the gate, everyone, because, crisis is a good opportunity. We all heard that quote, right? But everyone was navigating this very uncertain, period of time. New Zealand was actually doing really well, so there's a lot of people doing well, so that it became this very positive group dynamic.
Cool.
And then it just became the space where, you could show up as vulnerable or as, winning as you were on the day. Some days we talked about how to scale your business or inflation or, insert nerdy topic here. And then other days, we'd talk about what makeup we were loving right now, or packing tips was a favorite, because everyone wants to pack like a productive queen. So we were sharing. So there've been these just really fun, every week we drop in. If you show up, you show up, and if you can't, we get it, but mostly everyone shows up. Share great books that we're reading, business books that we're reading, sometimes fiction. It's just been powerful. And what's beautiful about it is that any moment someone has a question, you can throw it out to the group, and resources are shared and advice is shared. And what's been incredible for me, my journey in it, other than just it being just the highlight of my week, it's just the most incredible call, most incredible women, is that I don't really need to say much. They're all figuring it out. And it's just sitting there facilitating and picking stuff up and doing the occasional bit of cheerleading and basically managing the call. They've got the content. So it got me to a point where I was thinking, I wish I had this when I was a founder. I had pieces, but I never had that weekly. So I'm trying to figure out how to scale it. And it's obvious and easy, and it's also complicated when you look at the detail. And the piece that just happened magically is this group came together in the most perfect way. It's just a really good combo. I think that will replicate itself very easily, but I'm just trying to think about the best kind of wind to let it fly on. And so I'm very open to this. So if anyone's listening or anyone here in the room has ideas, and I don't want to repeat anything either, so I don't want to pick up and do something that's already being done in New Zealand. That's like just a waste of time. Happy to waste my time, but I'd rather lean on the people who are already doing it. But I think this is a bit fresh in that it's this weekly call and it's this deep sharing. So anyway, it's been awesome. We call ourselves the Wonder Woman because we are.
That's so cool. Community. Like my role here is community manager.
So you get it.
Yeah, always my brain's just like, how can we get people feeling valued, feeling connected?
Yeah.
And a lot of what you're saying is resonating, I'm sure, with all three of us being part of the Ice House in some way or another, with the cohorts that we have, and especially during COVID, how important those calls were.
Totally.
It's huge. And look, at the end of the day, being any kind of founder is very lonely.
Yeah.
It's very, very lonely. And just having a space where you recognize that in other people. It's not that you necessarily get, it gets solved for you, but you're showing up with other people who have the same challenges. It just feels a little less lonely at that point.
100%.
Do you think coming back to New Zealand that we celebrate success enough? And celebrate each other's success?
Publicly and in the media, no, not at all. I find it alarming. So good at celebrating sporting wins. And privately, I think there is really good support, actually. I find that most people, the absolute minimum quality that you need for the cohort that I created is vulnerability. Like, you've got to come in open and willing to share good, bad, and ugly, otherwise it doesn't work. And I think the community that works in New Zealand operates that way. They have each other's backs, they celebrate, but you're always going to get a mix in a population. In America it's celebrated, but more like in the bank account, and it's a little bit like that here, and I'm kind of not too interested in that. I'm interested in people fighting, and whether it works or doesn't work, like, let's celebrate the fight. But I think it's a really tricky, sociology, is that the right? Sociology, You're going to have to get pretty deep with human behaviour on that one to understand whether New Zealand is better or worse than other cultures and what we could do. But man, if we celebrated business success like we celebrated the All Blacks success, that would be pretty cool.
So true.
Yeah. Well, the sporting heroes, if we looked at it, we said, why do we not look at our business heroes the way we look at our sporting heroes?
How can we do that?
Well, it's funny because we also celebrate our sporting heroes when they become businessmen.
I know.
So I don't know I can't do that math. It's an algorithm that's well beyond me. There's a lovely small, grassroots thing that happens in local papers, because now I live in a small community. I see every now and then, when I'm not using it as fire fuel, you see but they're they're lovely, and really celebrating kids and young people starting up cool things. How do we change that? We just do it, we just do it. One story at a time,
And we have to all take some responsibility for sharing those stories. We can't rely on a newspaper to do it for us, or a TV show, just do it for us. It's how we all tell the stories. And
Well, it's interesting walking into Ice House this morning and you've got all the stories. I almost made myself late because I wanted to read all the stories, because I could do that all day long. TechCrunch in the US exists with all these stories. So maybe a crowdsourced version of that. Maybe we get stuff to pick that up. I don't, the cool thing about New Zealand is it's a small community and we all can reach out and touch somebody. Yeah. So, where there's a will on this, I think there can be a way.
And when you see something, then pick up the phone and ring the person that you know and say, well done.
That's a really nice one too. That's really nice.
It's not hard.
No.
You just notice something in a magazine and go, oh, that's interesting, that's Aaron. And then I'm going to ring him and tell him I just saw,
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I think that's gorgeous too. Yeah. And the group does the Wonder Woman group does a really cool job of spotting various things and sharing them on behalf of other people, which is nice. So maybe there's a way we can do that as well. But
It's a great discussion. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Might be another podcast.
I know. A whole nother hour and a half. I'd love to finish this conversation with talking about someone that's been influential in your journey and allowing you to, to thank them or just to mention them and the impact they've had.
I have a really hard time always like identifying single individuals. But as I thought about this, and as I thought about this podcast, and as I thought about my diversity, orientation, I actually wanted to shout out to some guys who have been phenomenally supportive with my shift into chair at Serco. And I was really, like we talked about confidence, I was really just feeling like I wasn't ready to do that step. And Simon, by the way, who was our chair at the time, was kind of courting me as a successor to his role. Darren Grafton, the CEO of Serco, was phenomenally supportive and just basically said, we want you. And actually Andy Lark, who was reasonably well known and he's Kiwi Bees in Sydney now, I sat down with him and he was like, well, if not now, when? And he's like, you can totally do it. And so what I love is that here are some guys who are all phenomenally supportive of me taking this step, and I freaking love it. I mean, I love it. It's just a whole nother level of problems to solve. It's a whole nother level of detail, and it's really awesome to be at that level of the table, sitting at the top of the table, so to speak. And you realize that you cannot do it without everyone. So it's this beautiful thing where you realize the level of team game. You know your place in a team when you're in the team, but when you're coaching the team or when you're the captain of the team, you're like, whoa, I need everyone optimally, so how can I support that? It's been really, really cool.
Wow, that's so great. Thank you so much, Claudia. Honestly, it's been an incredible conversation, and I know we've just all really lapped it up and enjoyed it, and so will the listeners. So appreciate you being on the podcast.
So
today.
great. This is awesome. I love it. I love the opportunity to think and share my thinking and create more community, right? So thank you for having me. Thanks for the awesome questions.